Good evening, everyone, and welcome to OTF Connects webinars. Well, my goodness, we've got an energetic presentation for you tonight. I'm very proud to be introducing Implementing Indigenous Education in Social Studies and History, Part 1. Our presenters are Kalinda Klein and Pamela Agua, and I know that Kalinda is joining us from Upper Grand, and I believe Pamela is from the Newmarket area. I've just met them this past week as well, too. But I did go check out their Twitter accounts and noticed that Kalinda's got over 17,000 tweets, and that doesn't happen unless you've got some great things to say. And Pamela's got over 7,000 herself as well, too. So when they pop those into the chat for you and you see a way to connect, you may want to do that to follow up. So once again, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to turn it over to our presenters and enjoy the presentation.
Great. Kwe Nabi Boachikin Kwe Indigenous Nakwa and Doda, Kiligan Vivi Scotland Jinjiva, Nishnave Kwe and Dow. I'm Kalinda, and I'm so excited to see 50 people signed up for our first go through this webinar. I'll pass it over to Pam.
Anin Bojo, Wawat Semanadu Kwe Indigenous, Tawana First Nation and Jinjiva, Hmong and Dodam, Nishnave Kwe and Dow. Thanks for joining us. We're pretty excited. This is first for Kalinda and I not to be in the same room, so we hope that we do it well apart. And we're excited to engage in this learning journey with all of you. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. So let's get started. So you just had a little instruction from Trish on using the clip art. So what we'd like to do is get a sense of who our audience is. We put lots and lots of slides into this presentation and reckon that we can move around based on who's here with us. So if you could use one of the objects on the bottom of that panel, the clip art, and put down someplace that gives us a sense of where you are in your panel. So I put down that it's a secret. So you can, there's no, the toolnet, it says that I'm hoping that Trish is seeing the note that they've lost the clip art box. So we can't do the first little one there. Trish, did you see that?
Yeah, that's new to me that so many have lost their clip art. That's incredible. And it looks like Sherry's trying going out and coming back in again. Yeah. So here we did this to save some time for everybody and make it nice and visual. So
yeah.
Let's see if Sherry comes back in and see if hers is gone. I'd hate for everybody to have to go out and come in again, but
oh, everyone says I've never had this happen before.
It's not me, it's not you, don't worry. So let's see, was it, I'm just going to watch and see who was it that went out.
It says after you stopped, after it went from your presentation. Oh, somebody did that, or was that Pam?
What?
Did you click the secondary?
I didn't.
No, so somebody's
someone's got access. It's back. Somebody said it's back for Alicia.
Okay, Alicia's back. Did you sign out, Alicia?
No, you know what I did? I tested it. I noticed her pencil was turned off. So when she goes and hovers over her name, it had an X next to her pencil, which I think took the clip art away. So I clicked on it, and then she was able to. So I just did Anthony's. So let's see if that worked.
Wow.
Is that working?
Are you still doing some more of them?
Yeah, I have been going down.
There we go. Okay,
there
so folks are trying it again now. Look at you. You are the tech wizard of the group.
No, no, no.
That's great. All right, so we'll start that fresh and have people finish doing this, and just let us know if that happens again.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So you're just indicating what panel you're in, if you're centrally assigned, if you work in Indigenous Ed, and I can take off my smarty pants. It's a secret. So while we're waiting for this, thank you for everyone who's, you can move it. If you put it in the wrong spot, you can just pick it up and move it. Branding said. I'm trying to, both Pam and I are also trying to multitask with Twitter. So thank you to all of the people who gave us a shout out at the beginning. Okay, has everyone had a chance? That doesn't look quite like 50 yet. Hi, Lisa. So glad you could join. Everyone's just putting their check mark in one of the panels, one of the little sticky notes here. All right, well, it looks like people are all over the place, so that's awesome. We're just, we're going to move on to the next one, so don't worry if you didn't get to put your sticky note on this. This was to just give us a little bit of a sense. Centrally assigned, that means you work at the board office. So thank you for pointing out the lingo there. Board lingo that we use and forget when other people don't know what we're talking about. So thank you for bringing that up. So what we have this because we're not doing this face-to-face, and obviously that's the best way to do it and not realistic when we saw that map at the beginning for everyone that's all over the place. So this image of the circle when Pam and I were together at Trent University when we were doing some meetings there with the Math Knowledge Network. And so this really is the best way for us to be started in a circle and acknowledging everyone. And our apologies for not taking the time to do that right now. With 54 people, if everyone even took 1 minute, then that's most of the webinar gone. So apologize for that. Do keep putting any comments or questions you have into the chat box, and then Pam and I will take turns. Whoever's talking, the other person will make sure to be watching the chat so we can get back to you and try to address any of your questions. I want to go through and talk a little bit about group norms. As Pam knows, I love my group norms because I really think it helps to facilitate starting off in a good way when you can't actually start off in a circle and acknowledge everyone and maybe do a smudge like I really like to do. So what we want to do is to make sure that people are monitoring their own participation, to be present and mindful of sharing the air. So when there's a point where people can be offering their perspectives with the mic, then we'd like if people, if possible, can use the putting your hand up, because right now there are 55 people in the room. So if everyone started talking over top of one another, then we're not going to hear each other. And it's really hard because you can't see if someone else wants to speak. I recognize that within this group that's here, there's going to be a large learning continuum, and that everyone could be anywhere along that continuum. And we're here because we all care and we want to support each other. Number 3, it's okay to feel uncomfortable with not knowing. And again, that's why you're here. That's why I engage in these conversations and especially enjoy spending time with conversations with Pam, because we're good, I think, at keeping each other in check, for reminding each other about things that we know and what we don't know. And then one thing that I know is that I know very little. And so I think if we're working from that standpoint, then we're going to do all right. And to stay on point, so tonight's topic is Indigenous worldviews and protocols, what it means to do this work in a good way and to develop an understanding of the changes to the social studies and history curricula. There are so many different things that we could talk about, but for tonight, what we'd like to do in the conversations with each other is to stay on those points. And you can connect with us in social media if you want to engage in other topics. So, land acknowledgement. So I'm talking now, so I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Pam. So the territory that I'm in is Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples, and they live in Guelph. And the map that's on the right are the historic First Nations lands. The black that's on the outside is Upper Grand District School Board, and then what I had our planning department do was look through treaty maps and then overlay the treaty maps on top of our board map, so that way we could be sure when we are acknowledging treaty partners that we're getting it right, because our board covers 3 different treaty partners. So we want to make sure we're doing justice there. Pam?
So we're a little similar in that we also sit partially on the treaty partner of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and we also sit with Georgian Island First Nation. So the 2 specific treaties that speaks to is the Williams Treaty and the Toronto, we don't like the word, the Toronto Purchase 3 treaty. So for us, our board has been engaged in research for the last 2 years, and it took us a while. For the longest time, we believed that we sat on one, but now we have used maps and research and community voices and partners to establish that we sit on 2, almost half and half in terms of our board space.
So what we want you to do right now is to use the poll that we have, and just using yes or no, do you know who your treaty partners are in your board? So if you could respond yes or no to that.
Hi, Galinda. Just a quick reminder for folks that just came in late that the survey poll is up at the top near your name. It's the 4th icon to the right. It's got a little check mark.
I got feedback when you were saying that, Trish, so I don't know if anyone else is getting the feedback when we're talking.
Yeah, I did too. That's better. Well, maybe not. I'll let you explain the survey tool.
All right, so the survey tool is the 4th box with the check mark underneath your name, the farthest one over. So you're just putting yes or no. We have 55 people in the room, so we don't quite have everyone yet checking off. Do you know who the treaty partner is in your board, or treaty partners? While we're just waiting for some people to stop there, I would just like to talk about how we're doing land acknowledgements within our system, and that we worked for a couple of years in my board to come up with a script that's used as a guideline. And what we want people to do is not read from the script, but speak from their hearts about what sort of connection do you have to the land. So when they're having an assembly or a gathering, we want them to acknowledge the land, but not pick up a piece of paper and just read the script, because then it feels like it's not genuine. And what we want people to do is genuine. Karen, you want to add?
Yeah, and just to add, for sure. And so we are similar in that we co-created these scripts because people wanted to convey accurate information. And I think that, like Linda said, it's important to personalize it and speak from the heart. And, you know, there was a really good article that I think both Linda and I tweeted out that spoke to that, and it was Canada's Impossible Acknowledgement. And it was a New Yorker article that spoke to how we wanted it to not become like a microwave warranty. And it was kind of, gives you some ideas of how to personalize it. It's really good.
All right, a lot of people here aren't quite sure, and so what I'd like to do is direct you is, if your answer is no, then talk to whoever the Indigenous lead is in your board, and so that person will be able to help direct you. All right, we're going to move on because we have lots of slides to get through. So, Pam, do you want to talk to these two?
Sure. Sorry, I was just gonna pop this in there so people knew what I was talking about. So I put in the chat the article that I talked about just to make it as a quick reference for you. So everyone always asks, why are we doing this? There are many layers to why. First and foremost, back in 2007, the Ministry of Education put out a framework that spoke to how we need to, approach Indigenous education in a good way. And then the TRC calls to action, I always say, give us teeth for that particular document to ensure that we are moving it in a good way. So we always like to reference TRC calls to action 62 and 63 because those two specifically speak to our responsibility as educators. What I do challenge people on our board to do is there are others within the 94 that speak to actions that educational systems should be engaging in to support Indigenous families and youth. So we just want to draw your attention to these. Specifically today, we'll be looking at making age-appropriate curriculum on residential schools, treaties and Indigenous people's historical and contemporary contributions to Canada. And we all know that these curriculum enhancements for grades 4 to 8 and 10 history are going to speak to those directly.
Oops, sorry, my talk button was off. I'm talking away. I just don't know what the background noise is. If we could just make sure if you're not talking that you have your mic muted, that I think that might be what some of the background noise is. The background noise just disappeared. There we go. Awesome. All right, so we have a short little video for people to check out, and some of you may have seen it before. It's one that I've probably shown and seen I don't even know how many times, and it just resonates so much. So we'd like to have this clip queued up, Trish. Are you there, Trish? Oh, do people have to watch it through the link?
Oh, she put it in there. Yeah.
Okay, so it's in the chat box. I thought it's going to show up on the screen with everyone together.
There you go. Yep, the link's in the chat box. Just trying to fix that feedback issue.
So it goes on. It's not going to show up on the screen with all of us at the same time. I thought that's.
Nope, they will go out and they'll watch it on their own time, and then they'll come back into the room.
Okay, all right. So we'll take it. So it's 3 minutes. So we'll pause for 3 minutes while people go and watch that video.
Yep.
Okay, I think we're going to guess that most people have watched that video because it's only a couple of minutes long. And if you didn't get a chance, if you couldn't open it, then hold on to that link and take a look at it later. If people could just in the chat box, a couple of people have made a few comments. Anybody have a comment that they'd like to, maybe 2 or 3 people's comments, and then we'll go on to the next one, or you can put your hand up and speak into the microphone. Just have a couple of comments on it, or we can just move ahead. I'm watching for hands up.
Me too.
Everybody's shy. Okay, no quick fix, yeah, absolutely. I think that for me is the big takeaway about the no quick fix. And I have to keep reminding myself about that when I'm doing my everyday job and I want something to happen that's not. Awesome. Great comments in the box there. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to the next one. Turning this over to Pam, and I'm going to watch the chat box.
Okay. So one of the things that I think that is helpful when we're moving forward and looking at the curriculum enhancements that are for implementation for September is to locate yourself and where are you right now in what you know and what are your areas of need for learning. And so one of the things that one of our colleagues within my board has used, and we've referenced where it came from, is what we call a knowledge inventory. So that way you can kind of determine what are your strengths, what are your areas of needs, and how might your current inventory possibly has been shaped by your life experiences. So what we've done is there is a link that you can go to and actually look at the knowledge inventory, and we've shortened it a lot. But for tonight, for the sake of our session, what we'd like to do is we would like to use the poll feature. We can use clip art, and these are 3 questions that have been extracted from the knowledge inventory that's linked in the previous slide. So if we can use the clip art right now and respond to these 3 questions, and let's see where we land. Awesome. So I think the one that's surprising me a little bit is, did you specifically learn about Indigenous people in school? Mm-hmm. And actually more people than I expected said yes. And more often when we are working with staff in our board, the majority, and I mean like 99% of the people have said that they did not learn about Indigenous people in school. So I guess part of me, I'm wondering, what is it that you learned? Because for me as an Indigenous person and with an undergrad minor in university in Indigenous people, the only course that I actually learned truly about Indigenous people was the one that was taught by a community member. And we learned specifically about, she was Anishinaabe, so we learned a lot of Anishinaabe teachings. And then the other one I took was on policy, and it was taught by a non-Indigenous person. And those were the only 2 times that I really learned about it. And in school, like, it really wasn't big. So I'm impressed at how many people have said that they did. And then the population of Indigenous people living in Canada is increasing. I think we are the fastest growing population across Canada. So And then everybody is in agreement that Aboriginal treaty rights are recognized in Canada's Constitution. And so I think what's interesting is, like, are those treaty rights upheld, right? And I know that that's a different conversation, and I think that, you know, as you work through that particular, you know, inventory, then I think you then can decide where to begin the journey with your students in your classrooms. And I think that what the majority will find is that you will be learning alongside your students, and that, you know, I don't want you to feel like you need to be the keepers of the knowledge, because you won't be in this particular case. And so this is a great opportunity for inquiry learning, which we go a little deeper in our second session about. So what we want to do is let's think about what are our main sources of information about Indigenous people. So let's use the clip art tool, and let's do a little check with everybody. And yeah, so what's your main source of information about Indigenous people?
Could people who are putting check boxes in the other, could you put in the chat box what your other is?
This is awesome. I'm loving seeing the checks in the personal contacts, and I know that for us as educators, a lot of our starting point starts with reading and reading great books. So I wonder, I'm kind of curious, maybe in the chat box you could also indicate, what are you reading? And so I know one of the books that we often talk about is Unsettling Canada, and another one is its partner, the Reconciliation Manifesto. And then, you know, there's the typical ones. The Inconvenient Indian is one that I hear a lot of our educators in our board reading, as well as there's one that one of our parents, I'll have to think about what the name is. But there's quite a few, so it'd be kind of neat to share. Oh yeah, everyone's been reading Seven Fallen Feathers. Yeah, Writing Canada's Wrong. Indigenous Rights, love it.
Awesome.
These are great books and resources. So let's think about what was the federal government's purpose in sending Indigenous kids to residential schools? Yeah. So as you're seeing, like most of us have indicated all of these. And so when we think about their purpose, their primary purpose was to kill the Indian and the child. And to do that, they forced them to learn English and French. They thought religion would help save them, Christianity specifically. It would speed up assimilation to the dominant culture that was moving into the space and settling into Canada, and, you know, looked at them to be potential laborers to earn a good life. So that's their words, not mine. Okay. So here we're going to, I guess, are we going to have them just type in here, Clinda?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot my mic was off again. Yes, absolutely, yeah. What we want you to do is use the text box, so that's the letter A that's in the middle. Create a text label to put on here, and just write as brief as you can, current concern. So a small text box with a safety environment, excellent, yeah, so people got it. We're not writing essays here, just a couple of words. Thanks. Awesome. So we'll just spend another minute on this. I'm very mindful of the time. An hour and a half seems like a lot of time, and it's not. So we have lots of great comments on here. Housing, healthcare, children in care coming up many times. I need my glasses to have a little bit better prescription for the small font. Safety, reconciliation, clean water. Yeah, these are fantastic. Yes, preserving languages.
What their children are being taught in their classes. I like that one. That's a great list.
Yeah.
So I think we have a pretty good handle, on current issues and concerns.
Okay, so if you're typing, I'm sorry, I'm going on to the next one because I think you have a good idea. So can you name a contemporary Indigenous musician, artist, actor, politician, writer, academic? So if you can say who you, just put a checkbox on there. We trust that you're going to be honest. All right, we clearly have the choir here tonight, so that's awesome.
That's so good.
It's awesome. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one so we can get into the conversations. So locating yourself on the knowledge continuum. So we borrowed this from Brad Baker from North Vancouver School District. I'm not sure if people, athletes, thanks Deb. Yeah, we could have put a whole bunch of different categories, and yeah, I'm sorry, missed the athletes this time. Locating yourself on the knowledge continuum. So when Pam had you start off by thinking about this knowledge inventory, is to just make sure you're really reflecting on where you are at this point in time, and on the idea of not reinventing wheels, because we all only have so much time. If someone else has created something fantastic and they give you permission to use it and you credit them, then I think that's a good thing to do. So what we have on here is Brad Baker that he developed with his team, their knowledge continuum. So it's taking a look at where are you at. So it's all about some self-reflection and looking at only two categories that they have at this point in time. It's beliefs and attitudes towards Aboriginal peoples, and now this is a language used in BC. Here I think I would be really careful about using the term Aboriginal. For the most part, I think it's not an acceptable term. Here I would use Indigenous, or make sure if you know what nation people are from. Both Pam and I identified ourselves as Anishinaabe, and that's what I prefer. but know that the language is different. And that's where a couple of people in the book thing, they talked about, in the chat box, they mentioned Chelsea Vowell's Indigenous Rights. She has a couple of chapters at the beginning of that book that talk about, the first one is what do we call Indigenous peoples, and that chapter I believe is called Just Don't Call Us Late for Dinner, and I thought that was really quite cute. And then the next one is, and then what do we call non-Indigenous people? So I just wanted to address the language thing here. So on this continuum, the two areas, oh sorry, thank you Christina, I moved my mic down because Pam said I sounded like I ran the marathon, so I was huffing and puffing into it, so now I'll move my mic back up. Okay, is that better? Can you hear me more clearly? Okay, all right, sorry about that. So we have beliefs and attitudes towards Indigenous peoples. And then on the next page, the knowledge of Indigenous peoples' history on local, regional, and national levels. So what you're doing is thinking about where are you within this continuum? Are you developing an awareness? Are you developing more of your own understanding and knowledge? Are you acquiring? So if you're acquiring, then this would mean that you have some competency in there. You feel pretty confident. And then once you get to that point, then so what? So what are you doing about it? So going into the action or advocacy.
Catherine has
a question. Now I see that. Now I understand what the dinging is. Yeah, so if you have a question, go ahead. Oh yeah, the French one. That one is problematic. I think the second term, I don't know how you pronounce it, because I'm not Francophone. I think I would still use Indigenous, even though I think all of the words that I see in the text are all the, how do you say it? I don't know how to say that. I think right now, when I was talking with a Francophone, a friend of ours, Melanie, she said that they're working on that still, figuring out what's the best terminology. So I don't have a clear answer for you right now.
Communication, but that just would be not so, well, that speaks to the First Nations, so I think that probably, but yeah, and language is always evolving and changing, so it's tricky.
Yeah, Kim, can we get to Kim, your question? Are you there, Kim? Oh. Okay. The name of the book about the terms, the one I just mentioned was Chelsea Vowell, Indigenous Rights, and it's rights spelled W-R-I-T-E-S. We're going to talk about a resource list at the very end. So when we're talking about resources, you'll see that we kind of have homework, and the homework is adding on to a shared Google Doc, and that'll be on there. Yeah, thanks, Pam. Okay. So then the next step after you've acquired, then it's you're at the point of taking action, because ultimately that's what we want to be able to do is take some action. So we have two different areas here, and so what I want you to do is to think about where do you locate yourself, and so on your beliefs and attitudes towards Indigenous people. So because I was using this, I changed the language to be what we would use here. Where do you see yourself as far as awareness, developing, acquiring, action, advocacy? So if you could use the clip art and put some mark along this continuum of where you're at. Oh, thanks, Trish, for the book link. I think, too, there's a really good way to frame things when we're talking about people putting themselves on the left-hand side of the continuum was just beginning the work. And when I did it the last time with a group of educators, I said, excited to be beginning the process. So I think that people are more comfortable talking about maybe not quite knowing when we frame it that they're excited to be beginning the work. Awesome, thank you for this. So we can see, as we had guessed, that people from our group norms, that people would be all along. Yes, the first step is a huge one, thank you. So then knowledge of Indigenous peoples and history on local, regional, and national levels. So where would you put yourself on this continuum? So not the same as the other ones. You could be one spot on the previous one and a different spot on this one. Awesome. More local and regional than national. Yeah, definitely. It's going. You know what? My experience is that it varies depending on where you are. Often, how close you are to either a First Nation community or an active Métis community, or if you have in my particular community, even though we don't have many Inuit, the people who are here are very active. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Pam to share her document, Teaching in a Good Way.
Thanks, Glenda. So one of the things that we thought would help to support educators on our board is creating a document that they could refer to kind of guide their practice, to ensure that they're not, stepping into appropriation. And I think that when I came into this position 2 years ago, there was a document, but it really read so heavy in the do not column that I felt like it was a little bit daunting and intimidating for educators to get started on their journey. And so what we've done over the course of this entire year, current school year, is revise the document to be more reflective from an asset lens, and so things that we should be doing, and then just a few collective things that we should not be doing. And it's important to note that the things that are typically in the do not column are speaking to doing them in the absence of community. And so there's always a way to turn one of the do nots into a do, but in our particular document, it's usually because you should be doing it alongside or have community leading that, and we shouldn't be doing in the absence of. So so what I'd like to do is to actually give you a little taste of what we have. And so, so each of in the document, it's looking at, 5 different areas. So integration of content and pedagogy, which is our work, people, nations, and individuals, those we are identifying through the work. We want to always take that asset based lens where we're looking at the positive portrayal, looking at strengths, contributions, and possibilities, which really speaks to a lot of the curriculum enhancements that we'll be unpacking soon. Also noting and unpacking bias stereotypes within media and literacy, and then always framing it back to a local context. And so when we're working in a good way, we're always have all of these things kind of in play. I did notice someone wanted to share the doc. It's in draft form still, and we hope to publish it by the end of the year. And to be honest, I think we're going to post it publicly alongside the Math Knowledge Network website, because that's kind of part of one of the things that I promised to contribute by the end of the school year. So it will be posted publicly, probably by the end of the school year. So do's and do nots. What I'd like you to do is, how about we use the clip art and use the check mark and the X, the check mark for a do and the X for a do not. And for each of these, put the appropriate icon in there. I'm loving the clip art tool. So I think clear sign here. We have a lot of wonderful educators who have been who've been learning, and so when I've often looked cultural items and eagle feathers that everyone's got an X, and then the important pieces are including authentic Indigenous voices and community connections, and bring in work by contemporary Indigenous artists, authors, musicians into the classroom. When we talk about community connections, Kalinda reminded me that her board doesn't have a First Nation community directly within the geographic area that it covers. And so we can look beyond our community being only the First Nation within our board and thinking about how does it move out bigger. And so often what we've done is we've engaged our parents of our self-identified students once we've built a relationship as a team alongside with them, and they're leading learning. And one of the best examples I can give you from York Region is Darren Douglas, and I've often tweeted, and he's tweeted when he's been working in our classrooms, and he's pretty much been working out pretty much like a part-time employee within our board and supporting visual arts as a Mohawk artist, and so thinking about how we can do that. So this is awesome. So now let's take a look at these three. Examine common stereotypes and how they influence our perception and judgment of Indigenous cultures and people. Have students create drums, dream catchers, masks, totem poles, and or other sacred cultural items. And have students create their own Indigenous stories and legends or rewrite traditional stories that have been passed down. So check and X away. So I'm just going to jump into the chat box for a moment and, looking at smudging kits for sale. So, one of the things that like a practitioner who works with Kalinda and I've had her in our board a few times as well, it talks about is, we're not asking you to teach our culture. And I think that, when we look at the curriculum, nowhere in the curriculum does it say to teach Indigenous culture. And so how do we ensure that? I mean, that's a great benchmark, I think, in terms of thinking about what should we do and not do. And I agree, I think a lot of us have a challenging time inviting community members into schools, and the lack of human resources and fatigue. Totally agree with that, because with our board in particular, we have a very small community, and so we're just trying to think about how do we empower those. We have Indigenous educators in our system too, and so what we have done is provided them with release time to share the knowledge that they carry, because they are super valuable to our self-identified students as well, and that's another opportunity to kind of broaden your Indigenous community. So we're pretty clear on this one. The one that I personally have reached a little bit of conflict with, and people might have been hesitant on the last one on the right, have students create their own Indigenous stories and legends or rewrite traditional stories. I have personal experience with that one with my daughter being asked to write one more right now. And so the reason why we don't do that is because those stories carry teachings, and they are typically delivered by elders and knowledge keepers and family members. And so we don't want to be appropriating that. And I don't know if, Kalinda, you want to add to that one, because I know that that's one that's still kind of happening in our board, and I don't know if it is in yours.
Yeah, it is. It is still happening. And It's just about educating all of the staff, and we know that's what we have to do, because they don't see that the same way as it's really clear. Well, actually, it's not clear for everyone about doing the toilet paper totem poles, but it's a little more clear than when they're taking that. And so we just have to keep doing this work and have these conversations. So I'm mindful of our time, and so I'm looking here, and we haven't talked about the curriculum yet. So I'm hoping we think you guys got it. So what I'd like to encourage is that you have these same sort of conversations with people, and the answers might be different when people don't see a couple of people already putting their checks and X's out. So when people are seeing here, so it would be really curious to have those conversations within circles that you're working, even within your school, within your division, within a department, and just to see where people are at. So these were all of the answers that people already got. And sorry, Shilpa, I see your question there. There's not an easy answer, and I'm gonna park that one until the end, just so we only have half an hour, and we haven't gotten to the curriculum yet. So I'm mindful of that right now. So we included these. I'm just going to flip through these slides, and this was the link that Trish had already put in. And there are 3 different holistic learning models for First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. As these were commissioned through the Canadian Council on Learning, which has since is no longer supported, but where you can find them is the link that Trish put into the chat box, which is on the AFN's upload site, which talks about having success with Indigenous students. So our agenda tonight was to look specifically at the curriculum, and so I'm going to move on to that and invite you to take a look at these guidelines, and even just looking at the visual, I think it's pretty interesting to see how is this different than a typical Western lens for working with student learning. And so the thing, like if you look at this one here, the First Nation one, I love when you look at where are your sources and domains of knowledge across the bottom. So where is it that you count on getting knowledge? We're so accustomed to, the knowledge is the teacher at the front of the classroom, or the knowledge is the textbook. And I just want to challenge you to think about, look at all of the options that are on here for sources of knowledge. And at the top of this tree for the First Nations guide, I love that we're looking at collective well-being. So think about that. If you're doing your practice, in your daily practice in schools and systems, how are you working towards collective well-being? To just have this in the back of your head as part of Indigenous ways of knowing. So you see on the Inuit holistic model, it's the same similar thing we're looking at on the outside community well-being. So everything is focused towards what is the best for the community. You can see the circle, you know what that's representing. And then the Métis holistic lifelong learning model, again another example of a tree, the learning rings. That's in a really small font that definitely can't read that right now, but you can blow it up and take a look at when you go into that link. And what I'd like you to do is think about how could you use some of this philosophy in your own practice. So these are the guidelines. Pam had talked about the guidelines, the do's and don'ts that we're teaching in a good way from her board. And so I just uploaded this general guidelines for teaching and learning with Indigenous peoples. And so we are in the process, you can kind of see on this page the draft, and even the first sentence at the last advisory meeting we had, some of the committee members or community partners are not happy with the language in that first sentence. So I'm going back to the drawing board, which is why this isn't available for people yet, but it will be. My hope is that by the end of the school year, it'll be uploaded onto our board website page. But what we're doing is having some suggestions for people on how do you engage community members, because sometimes people don't even know how to start that conversation. And we need to be talking about things like what's a good way to invite someone in, what is an appropriate honorarium or a fee schedule, what about gifts, what kind of gifts are expected or appropriate, how do you account for meals and travel and accommodation, how do you prepare at your site, and what does the guest want you to get together, and what about helpers for the guest. So these are all things that you need to keep in mind, and the way I like to give it as an example is to just think about what about if your favorite auntie was coming in to your school to give a talk. What would you do to take care of her, and to use that when you're inviting in community members. So here we have the pre-publication documents. Could people indicate with the clip art with a green check how many people have already seen this? Just so I have an idea. So if you put a green check if you have seen it and a red X if you have not seen this yet. All right, so more people have seen it than not, but quite a few people still haven't seen it. So the link that's on there should be a live one. I'm not sure, Trish, if that one is live or if you have to pop it. Oh, she popped it into the box. So Trish just popped it into the box. Oh, thank you. Fleming College has its policy. That's great. I'd like to check it out, see what it looks like compared to the one we're working on. The one I developed was borrowed the framework from the University of Calgary. So pre-publication document, if people who are able, I know if you're on a mobile device you may not be able to, if you click on that link, it's the pre-publication document, so then you have access to them. So if you have that red X on there and you haven't seen this yet, then I'd like to invite you to download that now. And if you do have it, if you can, make sure that you have that to reference, because we want to get you into that document right now and to start thinking about it a little bit. Pam, do you want to take over here?
Sure, I was talking and I couldn't turn the mic on. So when we're looking at the curriculum enhancements, for now, just for the sake of the conversation, we're going to look at the grade 5, but we want you to have the opportunity to unpack the grade that you are teaching or supporting or interested in. And one of the key components in each is that you're looking at continuity and change from a perspective, and then interrelationships, and we're looking specifically at the role of government and responsible citizenship, and the significance that not all societies are the same. And so in thinking about that, when we look specifically at the strands, some of the big changes is that instead of within the curriculum as an example, so like you could choose to talk about this, it is embedded right in the overall expectations, and it is clearly outlined. So Strand A, for example, in the grade 5, looks at heritage and identity, interactions of Indigenous people and Europeans prior to 1713 and what would eventually become Canada. And Strand B, people and the environment, the role of the government and responsible citizenship. And some of the framing questions, these are things that we haven't seen before in our curriculum. In fact, this may be the first curriculum that I've seen the word colonialism named in it, but some framing questions that they look at are, what are some ways in which colonialism has shaped Canada? We've never engaged in that conversation before as far as I can remember. Why is it important to consider the perspectives of all stakeholders when trying to formulate solutions to problems? And so thinking about, like, that would be a great conversation with grade 5 students in terms of whose voices are honored and whose voices are still silenced in those conversations, and thinking about how does colonialism still affect Canada today. And so I get pretty excited when I see that, and I think one of the first things both Kalinda and I did when this got released was we used the Affine Tool within the PDF to see how many times colonialism comes up, right, Kalinda? So I think that for the two of us, we were really excited that we were really going to have this conversation now. And so just looking, you know, ooh, I like this. My big question in grade 7 history and science was, how has colonization impacted Turtle Island? Beautiful. Great question. So this is one of the videos that you might want to use when you're working with students or staff within your school. And I'm going to get Trish to just pop that link in. And I think some of you have probably seen it before, but we're going to allow some time for you to watch the video.
Okay, we're gonna carry on because it should be about the time of the video. It looks like most people are back, and I'm mindful of the fact that we have 17 minutes to get through all of these great things we had. Just so excited by the interactions. So for people who were not at curriculum rollout, so if you were at a curriculum rollout for this pre-publication document, then you would have seen Dr. Susan Dion offer her timeline lecture. So Trish is putting the YouTube link. We don't have time for you to watch that right now. As you can see from the image that I have on the slide, it's really, really helpful. She sets the context for you. It's quite long. Even if you watch the first 15 minutes, it's really going to set a context for you about what was lost with contact. I think for me that was the strongest takeaway that I had, was I knew all about this timeline. I know all about all of the issues that were on here, but what I hadn't seen it from was the lens that she presents it, which was looking at how much loss there's been. And it was a visceral experience for me thinking of it from that perspective. So what we want you to do is think about how do you do this in a good way when you're bringing in any new topic. So in particular with adding Indigenous content, you want people to be critical thinkers. A lot of the comments that have been on the chat or in that page where someone kindly took a screenshot and then put that onto Twitter when we were talking about what are current issues. We want our students to be critical thinkers. We want to connect them as what does it mean when you're a good citizen? And then inquiry. Inquiry is just, I just love doing inquiry. Oh, somebody doesn't have their self muted, and we're hearing your side conversation. I don't know who that is. Honoring Indigenous voices. So that's how you're going to do it in a good way.
Anya?
So what we'd like you to do is to think about a grade that you'd like to explore and consider some questions from the pre-publication document. So this is the handout that came out at the curriculum rollout, is to look at, from a particular strand in your grade, what are you currently doing? What do students need to know? And what do students need to do? And what do I need to learn more about?
Shut up. Cover your eyes, do it properly.
Oh, so somebody has their mic on and you have a child in the background that we can hear. So if you could mute that, that would be great. So if you could take a little bit of time to think to click on that link that was given for your grade, and what one of the best things about the Curriculum Enhancements document that I think is that they highlighted everything that's changed. So you don't have to have the old documents in front of you and look through them and say, what it is that's changed, I don't know, and spend a lot of time doing that sort of comparison. Everything that's changed is highlighted for you. So what we'd like you to do is to think about right now in this one, in this box here. So before we go to the documents, especially because I'm looking at how much time we have left, maybe we're just going to do this one and we'll get you to look at the documents later. I really, like with 13 minutes, I don't really think we have time to send you away into the documents. But if you could use a text box now and add in here, what am I currently doing in social studies or history that includes Indigenous content? So one thing that you're currently doing. Some people I've noticed that at least one comment on about not being in the classroom, and that's okay. I'm thinking of, I've started working with one of our instructional coaches, and so it's not her classroom, but she has jumped all over working with math and Indigenous knowledge, and so it's really been a great partnership that's developed there. And so it doesn't have to be, in your own class, but look at how are you then bringing some Indigenous content in wherever you are. I am super excited about all of these great things that people are doing.
And the connection to authentic voice, it's pretty awesome.
Awesome. All right, so we can see that there's a range of people doing all sorts of really great things, from confederation, treaties, bringing people in, looking at different books, inquiries, media literacy. I love that one. I think of the film Real Engine. Just love that one. I'm looking at it here. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one because we only have 8 minutes left and we want a chance. So this, I would like to invite you to spend some time thinking about this, and now that we didn't quite get to this slide, I think we know where our starting point for part 2 will be. What do students need to know that is new? So if you're going to be able to join us for part 2, then this will be where we'll start off that presentation, is what's new, the highlighted sections of the curriculum documents, and what do students need to know there. So you have the link, or you'll have the link tomorrow once this gets published, so it'll be great if you take a look at that. And then what do you need to learn more about? So many of us in our systems have collaborative inquiries, which are fantastic opportunities for us to get together and have those really deep and hard conversations about what we need to learn more about. So Pam, can you speak to this?
Sure. So one of the things that we started to include as part of our curriculum enhancement rollout sessions that we're engaging in is an opportunity for educators to share some of the resources that they've been using, and that can be in the form of a text or that can be in the form of a video. So one of the things that I thought would be super helpful for everyone in this session would be an opportunity to contribute to that. And so here's just an example of what we did. So we looked at grade 5. Here's the example of strand A from the curriculum document. And then here are 2 resources that you can access to support this particular strand, and then just a brief description of what's happening with that. So what we did was we created 2 sets of templates, because I think that there's 2 layers to this. I think that we would look for resources that can support us as educators to deliver and engage in content with students at the elementary and secondary level based on those curriculum enhancements. But I think sometimes we as educators require some competency supports as well, because this could be and likely is new learning for us as well. And so that's, as a board, we do both of those things right now, and we're hoping that that could then be shared out and then could support everybody. And I don't think it's something, you know, we need to hold tight. I think that the more people could contribute to it, that would be great. And then what we could do is Kalinda and I could scan and provide some feedback as well in terms of, you know, our personal experiences in this role, in the lead role, in engaging with possibly some text that you might surface. I think the only thing I would add is sometimes it's good to speak to multiple people, because if the text may appear to be a good text, but there might be some context pieces that you're not aware of that might not make it such a good resource.
Yeah.
So I'm checking with my time, buddy. We have 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes. Yes. So the links are there. So Trish put the links in, and I just went back a page so you can see what we did was we put in this grade 5 one as an example. So it's really an annotated bibliography. So that's what we're creating here. And so what we'd like to encourage would be for everyone to dump in whatever they're using that they love. And so don't dump in what you think is, you know, mediocre. So we're looking here for our best resources. And then what we'd like to do is make comments on it before we go into our next session. So we'll take a little bit of time and look at it. And if people put ones in that may be a questionable resource, then we'll add comments on the side to just say, I think maybe, I'm thinking of some books where I'll look at it and say part of it is fantastic, and then there might be a little tiny bit of it that's problematic. And it's really important to know that and to share that out with each other, because we don't all have time to read every single book necessarily that's going to be on this list. But we're going to, different ones of us are going to have chosen ones that speak to our hearts. So we're hoping that people can go in and add that, and then we will come back and we'll have that to share out with everyone. So what we'd like you to do here, as we're ending up, one thing that you can commit to. So that's a picture of Geronimo Henry's hand. He's a residential school survivor. His number when he was in the Mohawk Institute is 48. And so I've done, the links are view only. I was sure that I opened them up. Pam, can you go and do that?
Yeah, working on it.
Thank you. So what's one thing that you can commit to? So one thing that you can commit to doing before the end of the school year. So text box in here. Create a text label in here. One thing you can commit to. Yeah, Carla, we want people to add directly. So we want people to, so we want to give people editing rights, so you're just going to go in and add to the list.
Okay, if everyone can refresh and try now, the elementary and secondary one, and then I'll just change the permissions on the other one.
I really like the number of people talking about conversations and dialogues, because that's how we affect change. You know, especially when there are only so many people who are leads, there are only so many people who are Indigenous in the systems, and so what we need are good allies, and allies who are stepping up and asking about the conversation, starting the conversation. These are great. So this one thing you can commit to is something that Nigan Sinclair has done at workshops that I've been at, and so I always let him know that I snag that idea and share it out, because I think it's fantastic. Oh, thank you. Carla says that she can edit on that doc now, so it's working. Yay. Two new people to follow on Twitter. Only two? Thank you for those people doing these sidebars. I was trying to do it. I was not as good as I usually am. I was trying to be really focused here. Committed to learning more and not be afraid to ask questions. That's a great one. All right, so we are at 9 o'clock, and so I want to be really respectful of people's time. And thank you, Trish put us in there for our shameless promotion of us on Twitter, but we're both there almost all the time. So you can find us and tag us on there if we didn't get to questions. When is part 2? May 9th. Thank you, Sally. Thanks for coming. Miigwech.
Miigwech, everybody.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. That was, I knew it would be, that was wonderful. I'm going to quick stop the recording, and then I have a couple of things to mention.